Aloha mai kako. My name is Sarah Young, and I am your HI-ACDA Secretary as well as your Elementary Repertoire and Resource Chair. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how I am approaching Hawaii state standards for music and how I am modifying my classroom activities in today's COVID climate, both for hybrid learners, distance learners, and for face-to-face classrooms. So go ahead and get comfy, and we'll get started. I teach pre-K to 8 general music and extracurricular ensembles at St. John Vianney School in Kailua. We have been teaching in person since the end of July, all the way up until now. We do accommodate some hybrid and distance learners as different students either have a cold and out of caution stay home, or risk COVID exposure, or whatever it might be. So a lot of my lessons I use so that they can be modified no matter what vehicle my student sees them, whether that is a video sent home, an email, or in-person instruction. I try to make my lessons doable for all students in all situations. So we are currently not holding our extracurricular classes to keep our grade level bubbles as contained as possible, but we are singing in the classroom with doors open, masks on, windows open, promoting air circulation, and minimizing the amount of singing that we are doing in one class period. So in one 45-minute class period, we will sing for no more than about 15 minutes for our lessons. So I am still completing my choral curriculum along with my general music curriculum. It just looks a lot different than it has in years past. So the Hawaii State Standards are separated into 3 categories. They teach how music is organized and applied. They teach how music communicates its ideas, and then lastly, how music shapes and reflects the culture around it. So when we look at that first category, how music is organized and applied, we're looking at things like pitch, rhythm, being able to perform different chord progressions, or being able to accurately portray different dynamics, all of those types of things. So I want to walk you through how I teach those concepts both to my hybrid, distance, and in-person learners. The first concept I choose to tackle in the school year is rhythm. That was a really successful unit this year because students got to make their own supplies instead of using our usual class set. So usually I will have a class set of paper plates that we cut up into various pieces to put together to make different measures of music to read. So for example, one paper plate will represent one measure of music, and we can mix up all of our pieces to create full measures. So one paper plate, for example, might have pieces that represent quarter notes and quarter rests. Another paper plate might have representations of half notes, and we cut up all of these various pieces to mix them up and create different rhythms to read. Most of the time, again, that's a class set. Students really enjoyed cutting up their own paper plates this year, deciding what color they wanted quarter notes to be, deciding what color they wanted half notes to be, and mixing up their own measures to use. You can play almost an around the world type game with these things without students ever having to leave their seat, so they stay within their own space, using their own supplies, and therefore safe and not mixing together all of our different bubbles. This also works for hybrid learners because, as you can see, my students have all of my paper plates, so I drew on paper for you. Hybrid learners and distance learners can do the same thing, just on paper, draw their own circles, cut out their own pieces, even if they don't have paper plates to use. So something that's friendly both for the budget, for wherever students are performing their lessons. We've gone through a couple different games and activities with these. They grow in complication as we move throughout the quarter. First, we start with just practicing together. Okay, Miss Young made a mixed up plate on the board. I want everyone else to make it too. Copy me. Okay, now let's read it together. We graduate to you get to make your own paper plate now. Can you say your paper plate for me? We'll then graduate to, depending on COVID procedures at your school, our students can move throughout the room if they sanitize their hands before they leave their seat and after they leave their seat, and are not touching anyone else's belongings. So we play games where they will sanitize their hands, stand behind their chair, switch desks with someone with hands behind their back to make sure that no one is touching anyone else's belongings, and they can read each other's rhythms as well. Using an activity like this means that we just read 15 rhythmic examples, depending on how many kids are in your class, that were all self-created. So we're inspiring composition as well as learning how music is organized through rhythm, learning how beats fit together in one measure. As students advance, we introduce things like dotted half notes, dotted quarter notes. We can take this paper plate project really as far as you'd like to go. So I keep them throughout the year, and as we add things like triplets, both quarter note and eighth note triplets, or whatever else we can add those paper plates in to practice our rhythm reading. In choirs, band, and orchestra with me, we use this activity as our sight reading warm-up activity, and then in general music as well. It's a great way to get the kids composing and using the supplies that they've created themselves. Another rhythm game I will use with my younger students, and even my older sometimes, are passing games that teach a steady beat as well as singing well and matching pitch and memorizing music together. So different passing games, a lot of them are seasonal, things like Pass the Pumpkin or Pass the Witch's Broomstick or whatever that might be. There are endless passing games that you can find online, and I'm sure that you already have in your repertoire. So the way that I use those now in our COVID climate is instead of having something that passes between students, either each student will hold their own scarf or their own tissue, and they will move it to the beat that passes around, almost like the wave in a stadium. Or we will do something like turn off the lights, and I will use like the flashlight on my phone to go from student to student, passing the beat, and as the flashlight comes to them, they have to make a face or move a pencil or something to that effect. So all of the passing games that teach us our steady beat and also teach us to sing together are definitely still usable in my classroom. And I also use in hybrid and distance learning as well by passing back and forth through the screen, almost like this, as I sing to them or as the class sings to them and as we send videos to our distance or hybrid learners. The second activity we use to cover rhythm is poison rhythm, and I will write a measure on the board of rhythmic syllables they are already familiar with. The rhythmic syllables I use are ta, ti, ti, ticka, ticka, and so forth. So my students will recognize this as ta, ti, ti, ta, ta. The rhythm that is written on the board, they will then label as the poison rhythm. We will then play the game. It's a call and response game, which again covers form, how music is organized, that's standard. We will play it that if I say a rhythm that is not on the board, that is not a poison rhythm, they repeat it back to me. If I say a rhythm that is on the board labeled as poison, they know that they should not repeat it back. Their job is to recognize it as the poison rhythm written on the board and not to respond back to me. So for example, we would learn the poison rhythm together, ta, ti, ti, ta, ta, and then the game would start. I would start with the rhythm, ta, ta, ti, ti, ta. They know that's safe. They repeat it back to me as a steady beat. If I were to, after a couple safe rhythms, say ta, ti, ti, ta, ta, they know that they should not repeat anything back, otherwise they are poisoned. There are a couple different levels to this game. We can, of course, make the rhythms, the poison rhythms, more complicated for upper grades or students who are more advanced. We can also instead of using rhythmic syllables spoken, we can use claps, we can use rhythm sticks, we can use snaps, so that the students have to orally recognize the rhythm without the rhythmic syllables that you might use in your classroom. We can use our paper plates from earlier. Students can create their own poison rhythms, play their own games in small groups. We can put more than one poison rhythm on the board so that they have to be recognizing and looking out for more than one rhythm at once. This is a really fun end of class activity for us that we use throughout the year to make sure that our oral skills and our reading skills are as good as they can be and are as sharp as they can be. I also use this same concept, the poison game, in all of my classes, also with things like poison pitch. So for my lowers and elementary students, this is how I will introduce pitch, with one staff line and notes above and below the line. So poison pitch is played the same way as poison rhythm, except now we're working on high, low, high, high, and then they repeat back, or I trick them with something different, or and all of the same different levels that we just put. We can use here we can use different rhythms in our high-low game for poison pitch. We can do the same thing with poison dynamics, and you can put different dynamics on the board. We can do poison progression in an ukulele class, or different poison notes with recorders, or whatever it might be. There are so many different extensions for this activity to focus on how music is organized and applied, so that students are both reading, orally recognizing, and performing all in one small activity, seemingly small activity, but really there's high-level music thinking going on, especially for our elementary students. This is a game that they ask for quite a bit, that they have a lot of fun doing, and something that you can absolutely copy and paste into your own classroom into a variety of different scenarios, whether it be working on pitch, rhythm, or progressions, dynamics, whatever you can think of to use. So after I introduce just our introductory notation of highs and lows, when we start working on how to read notes on a staff with my students, a lot of times I will play a game in the music room where I have a giant carpet with a staff on it, and we will throw bean bags onto the staff and figure out what note we landed on, or we'll play games where we race to jump to different spaces or lines on the staff to find a different note. Because the music room at my school is small and we cannot social distance inside it, I now travel to different classrooms. How I've modified that game is taking painter's tape and putting it on either the tile or the carpet floor of the classroom. And we are still able to play the same game, just not with our shared beanbag, of jumping to different spaces and lines, or tossing a wadded up tissue onto different spaces and lines to get points for our team and read different treble clef or bass clef notes. I also use Kahoots in and out of the classroom. Kahoot is K-A-H-O-O-T, is a website where you can create different quizzes in the form of a game show almost. You can assign that to people asynchronously and also play it synchronously in the classroom. My students in the classroom are not one-to-one devices, so most of the time the way the game is played is the questions will appear on the front screen, the projector of the classroom, and students on their devices will pick an answer and earn a certain amount of points for their correct answer. The way that I've modified this, because we are not on one-to-one devices in the classroom, is the students will take a piece of paper, cut it up into 4 pieces, and they will hold up A, B, C, or D, what they think the answer is. And so that way I can visually assess how their note reading is going. I can use this to test their recognition of different ukulele chords or recognition of notes on a staff, treble, or bass, multiple choice, any question that you can ask in a multiple choice format, you can use this tool to assess them without having them fill out a test or sing for you or move around the room or even be present with you in the classroom. You can use this for their distance learners. One of our favorite other concepts to cover is going to be form. This again falls into how music is organized, but can also be talked about as the way that music can communicate. If we look at lyrics, if we look at what a composer might be trying to say, form is something that can aid them to do that. So this brings us into our second group of DOE standards, which is how music communicates. A form activity that I really love to do uses visual art in this activity, and what I will do is I'll take a song that students are familiar with. So, for example, in this one, I chose Pupu Hinu Hinu, which probably about 90% of my students are familiar with before they ever come to see me. And what I will do is I will take the song and I will visually represent it in various shapes on the board, on a piece of paper that I copy and give to them, what have you. So in this song, the way that it's represented is we have Pupu Hinu Hinu, Pupu Hinu Hinu e. Ohe kaha kai e, Pupu hinu hinu e. And we can create the different visual representations for the different verses if we'd like to, but for now, this is the one that I used with them and showed them. I gave them all a copy. We learned how to follow the shapes at different speeds, at different tempos, and we also learned how this can show us the form of a piece of music as we look at repeated shapes, repeated words, repeated ideas as we go. There are lots of these types of visual representations, especially for classical pieces, classical instrumental pieces, that we do this activity with as well. With lower level students, so my kindergarten, first grade, we'll stop the activity there. We'll learn how to follow along on the piece of paper and we'll move on. With some of our upper levels, we can extend this activity into, okay, now choose your own song that you know, whether it's Row, Row, Row Your Boat or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and create your own visual representation of that song. I also create a list of songs on the board for them to choose from in this activity, and then we'll pass around our visual representations, or I will copy a student's representation onto the board and we have to guess off the list what song was it that they were trying to represent. This just opens up a whole realm of possibilities. We can talk about beat versus rhythm, how a lot of times the representation follows the rhythm of the song as opposed to the beat, but that we have to be keeping in mind our steady beat as we use our finger to trace around. We can talk about some really high-level music concepts with elementary students, even though all they're doing is writing shapes down on their piece of paper. We're really covering some high-level standards with them about both how music communicates different ideas and how it is organized into its different forms, rhythms, phrases, and shapes. When I further explore how music communicates with my students, I start to introduce the idea of timbre, being able to recognize timbre of different voices and of different instruments, and how those affect how you feel when you listen to certain music. A lot of times I will use this with discussions on Disney shorts. Disney short videos will oftentimes not speak. A lot of the emotion, a lot of what's happening is carried in the music of that piece. And so we'll show a lot of Disney shorts and discuss the instruments we hear, how it makes you feel, how is this music communicating this feeling to you right now through the timbre of a flute or the timbre of a tuba. And we will really take apart and dissect these Disney shorts together. Another game we'll play to recognize the timbre of our own voices in the classroom is Who Stole My Pie? The game Who Stole My Pie was introduced to me by the First Steps curriculum, and I use it as a way to get students comfortable singing in front of each other in a solo setting. I start it in our lower grades and bring it up through our upper grades so that even as voices change and as things there begins to be more anxiety with singing to each other. We have games like this that encourage us singing to each other and recognizing each other's voices. So I'm going to insert a clip of Who Stole My Pie here and talk about a little bit about what you're seeing afterwards. This is my kindergarten class playing a game of Who Stole My Pie.
Who stole a piece of James' pie? He's so sad he might just cry. James! Nice singing. Pie thief? Who is it, James? It was Stanley. Nice job, Stanley. Close those eyes. Who stole a piece of Stanley's pie? He's so sad he might just cry. Stanley, can you sing for us? Pie thief?
I stole your pie.
Stanley, who was it?
Mateo.
It was Mateo.
So in that small clip, first of all, apologies for my 8 a.m. kindergarten singing voice. But in that small clip, you saw 2 rounds of the game being played. So first, everyone sings together, Who stole a piece of whoever's closing their eyes at the moment, pie. He or she's so sad they might just cry. The person whose pie was stolen with closed eyes sings, Who stole my pie? And whoever I have chosen to be the pie thief will answer on their own, I stole your pie. And the closed eyes will have to guess who the pie thief was. And we'll go on through a couple different rounds of the game together. It just gets students so comfortable singing in front of each other and being able to recognize the timbre of each other's voices and being excited to recognize each other's voices. You saw there what I was doing was giving a tissue to the pie thief, and then as the person was guessed, taking the tissue, throwing it away, so that no one was interacting directly with each other, but we were maintaining our 3-foot distance and keeping our singing to a minimum during class. So that is my introduction of timbre to kindergarten, which later turns into, in upper grades, talking about the timbre of different instruments and being able to recognize how timbre, how pointed sounds versus dull sounds make us feel when we hear them. My last timbre activity is a game of 4 corners. In the choral classroom, I use this to assess our understanding of different vocal placements, things like making sound more pointed or in the mask, making sound more muffled, making sound more connected or more disjointed. All of those types of things I assess using a game of 4 corners. So I will assign each corner of the room a different timbre word, thing pointed, muffled, brilliant, and dull, all of those types of things. And then I will close my eyes, have them go to a corner, and then I will perform either a section of our piece, an excerpt of a piece we're doing, or I will play the piano, or I will do something to represent one of those timbre words. They have to recognize that timbre word. Oh, that was corner number 2, which was bright, so that means we have to sit down. I also do this to assess our understanding of instrument families. Each corner is assigned a different instrument family, whether it be string, brass, woodwind, or percussion. If I name an instrument of that family, they know that was the percussion corner, I'm out. Or if I play a percussion instrument, they know they're out. And I use this to assess both orally and cognitively that they understand the different instrument families and timbre words. Now, in our current COVID restrictions, we can't be running around the room and breaking social distancing in our different corners. So I have us instead, each corner is a different pose with your body. Things like putting your arms straight up, straight out, crouching, balancing on one foot. Those can be your 4 different corners instead, and then the students never have to leave behind their desk. This can also be modified for however active you need your students to be in a given day. If jumping up and down behind their desk constantly is corner 2, or if balancing on one foot is corner 3 to get some concentration, or standing calmly is corner 4, because that's what we need to do today. However that works for you and your classroom. That's my modification on 4 corners and my use of it in the classroom to discuss how music communicates through timbre and also how music is organized through timbre. Our last group of state standards deals with understanding how music reflects and shapes the culture around it and the culture that it is within. We do that here all the time without realizing it, and within our choral classrooms all the time without realizing it. We do it with things like, instead, with our form activity, instead of using something like Yankee Doodle, using something like Pupu Hinu Hinu. Maybe instead of who stole my pie, it's who stole my kulolo, or whatever that might be for you. But I choose to, while the standards say things like perform music from various cultures, or listen to instruments of various cultures, like that is how they define these standards. How I choose to define it in my classroom is by bringing as much of my students' home life into the classroom as I possibly can, which especially includes our distance learners. Things like in the pie assignment, or in an assignment to write down a song, going and asking a family member to help them, or showing me what they had for lunch today and playing the game stealing the bag of chips that you had for lunch, or whatever that might be, is how I choose to bring music into shaping and reflecting the culture that it's within. If you have any questions about anything I talked about today, where I found the HI-DOE state standards, how my administration holds me accountable to them, any other activities I might have based on form, timbre, rhythm, pitch in the choral classroom or the general music classroom, my email is going to be below. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, for giving me a reason to put on lipstick now that we're wearing masks. I never get to. But please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have anything that you'd like to say, and I hope to see you at our next HI-ACDA event, which will be at the end of December.